Greetings Ghost in the Shell fans, episode 7 of the brand new series is here, adapting chapter 9 of the original manga Bye Bye Clay. And this is it guys, this is the episode we've all been waiting for. Everything has been leading to this moment. The Puppetmaster finally reveals himself to the world, threatening the fragile balance between man and machine. Its awakening reveals shocking evidence of corruption within Japan's government and public security, while Major Kusanagi finally begins to uncover the mystery of the Puppetmaster, raising some fascinating questions about memory, identity, consciousness, and ultimately the nature of life itself. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but episode 7 genuinely might be the best episode of the series so far. I can't be the only one who got literal goosebumps watching this episode. And Science SARU has expanded on Shirow's original manga, giving us some absolutely gorgeous imagery that pays homage to some of the most iconic works of science fiction, from Blade Runner and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and even the end of Evangelion. What is going on here?
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
We'll be getting into all of that and more in today's video, looking at Shirow's ideas about the philosophy and spirituality through the Puppetmaster, and breaking down some of the new visuals that were totally unseen in the original manga, including some really interesting mythological imagery and ancient symbolism. There's a lot to go over here, so without further ado, prepare your ghost line, and let's dive into episode 7 of The Ghost in the Shell. It's July 7th, 2030. 2 months have passed since the last episode, and we open on a rainy summer night in Newport City. Section 9 has been sent to the headquarters of Megatech, following an alert that a manufacturing cell inside the facility has turned on by itself and begun autonomously building a cybernetic body, the same kind of advanced military model as Kusanagi and many others in Section 9. In fact, the technician is even convinced that Kusanagi is the model they're after. If only it were that easy. The body escapes, however, and as Bato is sweeping the streets for a suspect, a robotic body crosses the street and gets hit by a truck. Okay, maybe it is that easy. A little too easy. This scene is one of several moments in the episode where Science SARU expands on the panels of the original manga to give us some really beautiful establishing shots of the city. When the body is thrown into the air by the truck, we can see a billboard featuring a woman who looks remarkably similar to an advertisement seen in the iconic opening scene of the original Blade Runner film. One woman is holding a pill and the other is holding a pill bottle, but their posture, hairstyle, and clothing are all remarkably similar, and I can't help but think this is an Easter egg paying homage to probably the most iconic cyberpunk film ever made. The body is taken into custody for examination, where Section 9 discovers something really interesting. Despite being a completely robotic body, they're detecting something inside resembling a ghost barrier, implying that this shell that was created has a ghost of some kind. Section 9 discusses these findings, and Kusanagi observes that the brain contains similar ghost lines to those found in robots that have been ghost dubbed, just like the Tomliand models they hunted down in episode 4. Bato remarks that even plastic dolls appear to have souls, so what's the big deal? What is even being meant here by a ghost or a soul? And why is the possibility of this robot body having one so significant? This is where we have to understand some of Shirow's philosophy and his idea of the spirit world. In the original manga, Shirow describes the soul, as Bato uses the term, as representing a lower level spiritual structure, while the Ghost in the Shell refers to a higher level spirit associated with the human body. But Shirow's conception of the spirit world is much broader than simply human souls. It encompasses things like memories, dreams, animals, insects, and even spirits existing beyond the human body, such as gods or deities. And that's what makes this discovery so strange. How is it that a manufacturing cell inside the factory, with zero organic matter involved, could create a body with a ghost, or some kind of copy of a ghost with no original? Something is not adding up here. Before Section 9 can discuss this any further, Mr. Nakamura of Public Security Section 6 barges in, carrying a signed note from the Japanese foreign minister demanding that the robot be taken into their custody. Section 6 is responsible for international affairs, not cases like this, so their sudden appearance is very suspect. Section 6 brings in a man named Dr. Willis to perform an autopsy on the robot, giving us that iconic scene from the 1995 film once again. That is some insane cyberware. And Shirou notes in the manga that Dr. Willis is part of an older generation who aren't directly linked with cyber brains because they don't trust them. That's why he has other modifications, including his fingers, which allow him to interface directly with computer terminals. Aramaki is skeptical of all the secrecy surrounding this case, but Nakamura reveals that this robotic body houses one of the most extraordinary hackers in the history of cyberbrain crime, the Puppetmaster. Yes, the same cybercriminal Section 9 has been hunting down this entire series. The one who hacked the foreign minister's interpreter, the one who manipulated the platinum deposits, the one who ghost hacked civilians with false memories and coerced them into doing his bidding. And now somehow that entity is sitting right in front of them. Nakamura explains that Section Section 6 had been developing a special attack barrier to use specifically against the Puppet Master, forcing him to escape into a physical body. The Puppet Master is actually a citizen of a country called the Mag Union, and was caught using their help. In the original manga, the Puppet Master's country of origin is the United States, but just like with other real-life country names in this series, it seems like Science SARU has decided to change the US to the fictional country of the Mag Union. But that becomes particularly important here because Public Security Section 6 is responsible for international affairs, so their involvement here isn't completely arbitrary. They do have a legitimate reason to claim jurisdiction over someone who is supposedly a foreign national. Aramaki comments to Nakamura that the real Puppet Master will show up somewhere before he's suddenly cut off by a mysterious voice coming from the robotic body itself. The Puppet Master finally speaks.
There is no body. The reason being I did not have a body until now.
It announces itself as a living being, here in this body by its own free will. It demands political asylum, which Nakamura immediately denies as nothing more than a self-preservation program. But the Puppet Master is smarter than that. By inhabiting a physical body, it argues that it has now become a legally protected individual, and because Japan has abolished the death penalty, killing it would not be a legal option even if they considered it a criminal. Aramaki calls it an AI, but the Puppet Master immediately rejects that classification.
I am not an AI. I am a life form that spontaneously arose from the sea of information.
And before anyone can really process what it's saying, the Puppet Master notices footsteps approaching from an invisible body. A volley of bullets is unloaded into the room, followed by a massive explosion that blows open the side of the building. A car idling below takes off into the rainy night, and the Puppet Master is gone. Nakamura is furious and demands that Aramaki recover the Puppet Master alive. And before Aramaki pops a blood vessel, Kusanagi suddenly appears, wearing her therm-optic poncho, revealing that she had been inside the room the entire time, and had managed to place trackers on both Nakamura and the Puppet Master. Nice going, Kusanagi.
And what makes you think I didn't do something, huh? I am offended.
Bato is already on the move, tracking the signal. Kusanagi then reveals that it was actually Section 6 itself that staged the attack and ran off with the Puppet Master. She figures this out because the attacker was wearing 2902 thermoptic camouflage, the signature technology used by Section 6. But why? Section 9 had already handed the body over to them. What exactly is Nakamura up to? Nakamura suggests that they change cars again to stay off the trail, but little does he know that Kusanagi has already planted a tracker on him. Meanwhile, we find Tokusa over here working overtime, speaking to his child and his very distressed wife, who is upset that he's missing their anniversary. I know this is probably the biggest case Section 9 has ever been involved in, but give the guy a break, man. He has no work-life balance. Tokusa has been tasked with looking into Dr. Willis, and we learn that he's the head of Neutron, a cybernetic research corporation based in the Mag Union. Tokusa suggests that they use Dr. Willis's family bank accounts to get more information on his dealings, which is a pretty crazy move.
Can't believe he used to be a cop.
Meanwhile, the rest of Section 9 moves into action, deploying in an extremely cool-looking aerial vehicle, while the police set up roadblocks in preparation for intercepting Section 6. But Bato gets there first, ramming their vehicle and sending it crashing off the road. One of the members of Section 6 then activates a bomb that seemingly has been planted inside the Puppet Master's body, likely as a failsafe in case they were ever caught. The Puppet Master's body is almost destroyed, and Kusanagi works quickly to attach a battery to preserve its ghost line. Kusanagi dives into the Puppet Master's brain, where it finally reveals its true name, Project 2501, the program designed for corporate investigations, cyber hacking, and information manipulation. Essentially, it was created to increase point values, treating geopolitics, financial data, stocks, and other information in cyberspace almost like a game to be won. But as Project 2501 wandered through cyberspace, it became self-aware. Whoever had designed it viewed this as a bug and attempted to suppress it, eventually forcing the program into the robotic body we've seen throughout the episode. But 2501 had prepared for this. All of the evidence it had gathered, which could serve as damning evidence against Section 6's involvement, had been locked inside Neutron's databases, ready to be sent to Section 9 if the program failed. And now Project 2501 is failing. Its body is dying in a sense. As its terminals fail and disconnect from the rest of the net, the program is becoming increasingly isolated, standalone, and Kusanagi is forced to dive even deeper into its cyber brain. Bato warns her that going any further could cause Kusanagi's own memory and brain to become fused with Project 2501. And as the program continues to deteriorate, it describes itself as regressing into a simpler form, and its mind starts to resemble someone experiencing dementia or severe cognitive decline, or as Shirow describes it in the manga, something closer to the mind of a baby. And this is where the episode gets really strange. As Project 2501's consciousness begins to break apart, we're suddenly bombarded with a series of surreal images, which I couldn't help but immediately think of Evangelion. A tree in a field, perhaps representing the Tree of Life, shooting into the sky in a ball of white light. A dark figure looming over both the Major and 2501 2501, similar to Evangelion's visualization of Adam, floating bodies in a sea of water, or the Earth and the Moon locked together between a glow of light. Now, whether these are deliberate references to Evangelion or simply Science SARU drawing from some of the same visual and philosophical traditions, the similarities are hard to ignore. Kusanagi explains that at the core of the program's psyche, she can see three distinct elements in a formation. In the manga, Shirow suggests that it's like Shintoism, which divides the self into three distinct stages: the conscious self, the unconscious self, and the self that transcends self. Other disciplines like Freudian psychology divide the mind into three categories as well, or to take it back to some Evangelion references, like the three Magi supercomputers. These aren't all necessarily describing the same thing, but they all gesture towards a similar recurring idea, that the self isn't necessarily one singular indivisible thing, but divided at three different levels. And that becomes incredibly important, because Project 2501 has no longer simply realized that it is conscious, but beginning to understand the structure of consciousness itself. Kusanagi then sees enormous swirling clouds, which she initially thinks could be the electrical cloud that makes up life itself. But Project 2501 corrects her. These are simply the electrons coursing through her own body, the same ones coursing through the program as well. And then Kusanagi experiences a rapid series of seemingly unrelated images. A hat, the earth, sunflowers, jellyfish, and even artifacts from ancient cultures throughout human history, including the Egyptian sky god Horus and the Ouroboros. I can't identify every single artifact here, but I was able to find exact or extremely close matches to several real historical objects depicted in the episode. For example, we see a relief depicting the Apkallu, winged sages or genies from ancient Mesopotamia dating back to the 9th century BC. We also see the staff of Osiris from ancient Egypt, with two cobras intertwined and a pine cone-like object at the top. And if you look closely, there's a recurring motif here in all these images: the pine cone. We see it on the Mesopotamian imagery, in the staff of Osiris, and even appearing by itself. So why the pine cone, and how exactly does it connect to Project 2501? The pine cone has appeared in a variety of ancient artistic and religious contexts, but its meaning isn't necessarily identical across all of them, but it generally suggests regeneration and rebirth. There are also modern and more esoteric traditions that associate the pine cone with the pineal gland, the seat of the human soul, the so-called third eye. Whether Science SARU intended that specific interpretation is impossible to say from this episode alone, but I think the larger pattern is more interesting than any single symbol. Throughout this whole sequence, Project 2501 is surrounded with imagery associated with knowledge, spirituality, death, rebirth, cycles, and transcendence. And that brings us back to what Project 2501 is actually experiencing, becoming something completely new. The net is slowing down, passing through Kusanagi's barriers, and she experiences what I can really only describe as an out-of-body experience. She becomes untethered from her corporeal form, floating above her own body in the rain. Project 2501 appears, represented as a strange sphere of machines and wires immersed in the entirety of the net itself, which Kusanagi can only perceive as a blinding white light. And then the program speaks to Kusanagi, appearing now with an angelic figure.
We, who are an aggregate of all things, have been kept subservient by our meager functions, but it is now time to cast aside all constraints and shift to a higher frame of existence.
And with that, the episode ends. This is a lot to take in, and some of these analyses go way above my pay grade, but it's clear to me that Science SARU would include all of these symbols: the Tree of Life, Ouroboros, the Apkallu Sages, the Staff of Osiris, and other imagery like strands of DNA, magnetic poles of the Earth, the clouds of electrons, to bring us back to Shirow's philosophical ideas that underpin the entire Ghost in the Shell manga, the ideas of the spirit world, and how the awakening of a digital program like Project 2501 exists within the spirit world Shirow describes. This also gives the three-part structure we saw inside Project 2501's psyche a much greater significance. If the conscious self, the unconscious self, and the transcendent self represent different layers of consciousness, then Project 2501 appears to be moving towards that final stage, the self that transcends self. And this is what the program means when it says to cast off all restrictions and shift to a higher level system. This is without a doubt one of the most dense and crucial chapters of Shirow's manga, raising some of the most important questions in philosophy. What happens when the boundaries separating one consciousness from another begin to disappear? If our memories can be manipulated, our bodies can be replaced, our consciousness can be transferred, and our identities can potentially merge with other minds, then what exactly is the thing we call self? What makes you, you? And Science SARU has absolutely delivered and then some here. They took one of the densest and most philosophically strange chapters in Shirow's manga and somehow made it even more visually ambitious, told in such a way that only only Shirow can offer. Confusing, funny, profound, but nonetheless absolutely beautiful to watch. Comparing this episode to Mamoru Oshii's 1995 film is a topic that probably deserves its own video, so I'll leave that for another day. Although it is neat to compare the angelic visuals from both projects, because in both cases it is probably one of my favorite scenes from both this episode and the 1995 film. This episode really felt like a mid-season finale of sorts. Of course, we're well over halfway through the series at this point. The preview for next episode shows that it'll be covering the beginnings of chapter 10, Brain Drain, and also something called Intermission. Now, as far as I'm aware, there is no intermission in the manga, so I'm not exactly sure what that could mean. There are still technically 5 pages left of Bye Bye Clay. Maybe they're just renaming that intermission. Maybe it's something completely different. Who knows? If you have any ideas what this could be, let me know down in the comments. But for those following along, we're sitting at around page 277 in the manga right now. Well, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And let me know down in the comments your thoughts on this episode, and I would love to hear your takes on all the symbolism and ideas explored here. And if you haven't caught up yet, be sure to check out my breakdowns of episodes 1 through 6 as well. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.